Lads and lassies, it'll be more fun than an Irish jig this coming Saturday, St. Paddy's Day at Frontier Village. They'll be having free cakes and a free juice bar for everyone, thanks to those blessed folks at Edelweiss Dairy. And Cactus Kong, the big green gorilla, will be there too. Oh, you're that gorilla, I see. And there'll be rides and games and shows and fun galore. And listen, you bring a real honest-to-goodness four-leaf clover and you'll get free admission and unlimited rides for 4 people. It's all this Saturday at Frontier Village in San Jose from 10 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon. What a fun way to spend St. Paddy's Day. How about that big fella? I'd rather you'd kiss the Blarney Stone, Mr. Kong.
Hello and welcome to The Lowdown on the Plus Up, a podcast where we look at everyone's favorite theme park attractions, lands, textures, and novelties. We talk in, over, about, and through our week's topic, and then, with literally no concern for practicality, safety, or economic viability, we come up with ways to make them better. My name is Kelly McCubbin, columnist for the theme park website Boardwalk Times, and with me, as always, is Peter Overstreet, University Professor of Animation and Film History in Northern California. So, Pete.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going to be talking about not Disneyland. We're going to take a little sidestep for a minute, and we're going to go to San Jose, California.
San Jose, California. There's nothing down there, Pete.
Oh, there's a bunch of stuff down there, but this is the first thing that we're gonna cover. And I have a soft spot for it because I grew up not too far away from it. It was literally in our backyard, and it's good old Frontier Village.
Frontier Village. Mm-hmm. I got to tell you, like when I started looking into this, I was surprised at how strongly people feel about Frontier Village.
Yes.
People have a real emotional tie to this. Mm-hmm. And speaking of, the reason that we're doing Frontier Village is our friend out there who listens to the show, Danica Bird, wrote me online and said, hey, why don't you do something about Frontier Village? And then mentioned that she had, really strong childhood memories of it, and then sent me some reference material about it. And I was like, wow, okay, let's do it.
Thank you, Danica. Yeah, absolutely. So we are listening to our audience. So we are. This is an audience request show this time around.
It is an audience request show. A little bit later, we'll be doing Total Eclipse of the Heart.
As the prospector.
Turn around, bright-eyed. So it's interesting, and I really want to get some of your impressions about this because as I started looking stuff up about Frontier Village, I will admit I knew next to nothing about it. I knew that it existed, and I knew that it hadn't been there for a long time, and I kind of knew that it closed sort of in conjunction with the openings of Great America.
Yeah, Marriott's Great America was one of the impeti of it closing down.
But past that, I really didn't know much about it. And I start looking stuff up, and this thing has a following.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They still, to this day, have yearly get-togethers on the site.
Yep.
People come out and do gunfights like they used to do in the park. Mm-hmm. The group, the Fall Guys, who I don't know if any of them are actually the same Fall Guys that actually appeared in the park, but they come out and do stunt shows in the area. People who worked there, 50 years ago, still show up at this thing and talk about it being the best job of their lives.
Yeah.
There was a guy that, I forget what town he was in, and it's not there anymore, but there was a guy not far from there that built an entire replica.
Oh, in Campbell.
In Campbell, thank you.
Yeah.
Of Frontier Village in his backyard. Mm-hmm. Like the fan response to this thing is insane. So Pete.
Yes.
You went to Frontier Village.
Yes, on a regular basis.
Do you have these same sorts of feelings?
100%. I mean, I have this phenomenon that I don't mention this very often, but I will for the show, in the fact that when I think of Frontierland in Disneyland, There are memories of Frontierland, like if I'm dreaming about it or if I'm just kind of reminiscing about it, I sometimes get the parks mixed up from childhood memories going, didn't they used to have that at Frontier Village? Oh, no, that was Disneyland. Didn't they used to have that at Disneyland? No, that was in Frontier Village. Oh,
now, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I have a similar situation with the original Six Flags Over Texas, which if you hadn't been to any of the original Six Flags parks when they opened in the 60s and 70s, they were much more themed environments than the Six Flags parks are now. But they did a lot of stuff, much in the same way that Frontier Village did. They did a lot of stuff that was very much a carbon copy of what they were doing in Frontierland. And much like at Frontier Village, there were gunfights in the middle of the street. There were people doing stunts, falls off of buildings.
Wally Bogue.
Wally Bogue.
Pecos Bill would be out there, shooting his teeth and shooting his gun and having a great time.
Right. And you'd see the same thing at Six Flags and you'd see the same thing at Frontier Village. And I have that same thing where I will sometimes remember something about what I thought was Disneyland in the early years, and it was actually Six Flags Over Texas.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, let's do a quick little deep dive here.
Yeah.
Okay, so our deep dive has some weird origins.
Okay.
The land that Frontier Village was built upon actually has its connections going all the way back to the 1880s. And the park itself has some interesting connections to other things from that era as well.
Yeah.
I'll start with the land. The land was owned by a woman named Mary Hayes Chenoweth.
Yeah.
Mary Hayes Chenoweth was the widow of Mr. Hayes, and they had built a farm out there, a large farmhouse. And
I believe he was General Hayes.
Yes, he was, as in General Hayes.
Yeah.
And they built this giant palatial mansion, not too far as Old West standards are concerned, from another eccentric widow, Miss Sarah Winchester.
Yeah.
And I find this very, very fascinating. Because for those who don't know, I used to work at the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose. And I remember hearing a piece of trivia from one of the tour guides there explaining that there was kind of an odd connection between the Hayes Mansion and the Winchester Mystery House. In the fact that they both have psychic connections.
Okay.
Mary Hayes Chenoweth was a psychic leader. She was like theosophist and crazy, like very big on psychic powers. She apparently could see through bodies and see what was affecting people, like an X-ray machine, and figure out what their ailments were just by looking at them.
So she was like a Madame Blavatsky type.
Very much in that world. According to Wikipedia, she would pinpoint medical issues and take their ailments into her own body, and then heal them using herbs, water treatments, optimism, faith, and dietary restrictions, including abstaining from alcohol, coffee, tea, and tobacco. She was allegedly able to confer with patients who did not speak the same language, see patients en route to her, and foresee economic trends, allowing her to capitalize on downturns and upswings in the market.
I love how it's like, oh, there's psychic ability and all of these things, and there's like, and also we're just going to remove alcohol and cigarettes and caffeine from your diet. I think I know what's doing the heavy lifting in these cures.
Yeah, pretty much. The family owned about 700 acres in San Jose.
Yeah.
Pretty much what would eventually become what is known as the Blossom Valley area, which is where I grew up as a kid.
Okay.
Growing up in that southernmost tip of San Jose, like next stop Morgan Hill. Yeah. Home of Mary Blair.
Hey, it was her birthday this week.
Yay. Yeah. Happy birthday, Mary. I hope it was colorful. And I don't mean that facetiously. I mean that with all my heart.
No, absolutely. I hope it was a torrent of shocking pastels.
Little dad's a watercolor and a 5-legged goat. Well, growing up in that neighborhood was interesting because it was suburbia broken up by orchards of pear trees or cherry orchards or apricot trees. So we were constantly going to fruit stands, even in the 70s and 80s, picking up fruit. That was all land that was started by the Hayes. Eventually, the Hayes family. Eventually, was like sold off bit by bit by bit.
Interesting.
So the land was about 13 acres or so that they bought originally for the park. And then they, the owner of Frontier Village, Joseph Zukin Jr. of Palo Alto, California.
Yep.
He was inspired to build this park after his trip to Disneyland in 1959.
Yeah, he went out for some sort of auto show and just happened to go by Disneyland very near when it opened, actually, and changed all of his plans for his future.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He was originally going to build it along El Camino Real in Sunnyvale, California.
Yeah.
And the plans were drawn up for that in 1958, but it just didn't work out for him as far as the real estate was concerned, so they decided to build it near the Hayes Ranch.
Yeah.
So they bought those acres, and he did something that Walt did not do. He built extra land just in case they wanted to expand the park in the future.
Yeah, there's a big irony there, but we'll get to that.
So the original design was by a guy named Paul Murphy, who was also working full-time at Santa Clara University at the time.
Yeah.
He was too busy to continue in designing, so he handed over to a guy named Lawrence Hollings, who...
We're going to get
have some facts about him. We're going to talk about him in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to get into Laurie Hollings.
Yeah, so that's our main connection here of like early days as far as the land is concerned and how it was founded. Now, let's go back to the 1880s.
Yeah.
And there was a guy who I think this is the origin of the entertainment that a lot of theme parks, even to this day, which is the stunt show gunfight. Mm-hmm. Whether you're in the streets or whether you're sitting on bleachers watching the events happen in front of you, like at Universal Studios, this spectacle started with one man, and his name was Buffalo Bill Cody.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Buffalo Bill's Wild West show kind of helped formulate this notion of what the Wild Wild West was all about. Mm-hmm. You know, most of his show was lauded as historical. It was mostly bullshit.
Hello?
Right, yeah, exactly. I refer everyone to my Frontierland article from about a month ago about the origins of our picture of the Wild West, because it's pretty much all lies.
Absolutely. Mostly started and perpetuated by Buffalo Bill. He was very key. And it established all of the tropes, which is very odd because later on in his years, he would actually start booking real people, including Wild Bill Hickok, Calamity Jane, all these famous names of the Old West, who mostly became famous because they traveled with Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
They went to England on a tour.
Yeah.
And performed on the stage. During that time, one of the Native American chieftains who was traveling with them passed away and was buried in Brompton Cemetery. But they were also in town right when the Jack the Ripper murders were occurring.
Holy cow.
And the Native Americans were actually listed as suspects briefly. Like maybe it's one of these Redskins that is causing this problem.
Yeah,
it's like,
that
okay.
Happens, yeah.
Thank you, racist, Londoners. Yeah. But still, it became an international success. And I think that also because they traveled I don't know if they traveled to France, but they definitely traveled to England. France has an obsession with the Wild West.
Yeah, they still do. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting if you go look at the Disneyland there. Yeah. Because not only do they have their Frontierland section, but their Haunted Mansion is part of that.
Oh, yeah.
Phantom Manor is kind of in the Old West there.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It is.
I mean, even with the works of Moebius with, Blueberry, it's really Lieutenant Blueberry. So the Wild West show has been something that has existed all the way back from the 1880s. And I would also, as much as Frontier Village was inspired directly by a visit to Disneyland. I have to mention very briefly, because we should probably do another show on this entirely. Yeah. But I do want to mention this briefly, that there was probably another influence that came into this, which was not too far from Disneyland. Yeah. With another Walt, Mr. Walter Knott, and his wife opening up a roadside restaurant and finding that Mrs. Knott's chicken and her boysenberry pie which Walter Knott had invented and named after his friend, Mr. Boysen.
Right, yeah, he bred the boysenberry. It did not exist before him.
Yep. And it was so popular that people were waiting in line just to sample his chicken and boysenberry pie. So he wanted to give him something to do. So he bought a ghost town
Yeah.
and shipped it and named it Calico.
Yeah.
And then started charging money, and they started adding entertainment. They added a train, they added a stagecoach, and it just built and built and built, eventually becoming the theme park that we know today as Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah.
Walt Disney would go to Walter Knott's place a lot when he was building the park.
Yeah, they liked each other a lot.
They did.
They got along really, really well.
And you can see Knott's Berry Farm's influence on Disneyland.
Absolutely.
So I would actually show this kind of lineage of going from Buffalo Bill to Walter Knott to Walt, and then all the way to our friend Joseph Zukin.
Now, here's an interesting thing that I heard recently, and it wasn't in research for this, it was for something else. Actually, it was in research for our last episode, but Buffalo Bill lived long enough that I believe he actually met a young Walt Disney.
Oh, I could believe that.
There is a story of Disney early on, and I don't remember because I didn't research it for this, but I don't remember what city he was. But, Disney's like 5 or so and actually shakes hands with Buffalo Bill Cody.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And, it's interesting how strongly this still to an extent holds sway. I mean, we are middle-aged gentlemen, and
yes.
And, one of my favorite movies of all time is Bronco Billy, which is very much in the lineage of the Buffalo Bill Wild West shows.
Oh, yeah.
And do we even need to talk about Knight Rider? Because it's very much in the lineage of the Buffalo Bill Wild West shows.
Yes, it is. Yep. And we've talked about this before with the notion of the Wild West.
Right.
Where Americans have this very odd relationship to it because they like it, but they don't like it. It's almost like a shame thing because of the colonialism and the racism and the stealing of land, which is very,
that's
very
a problem.
It's very valid. It's a very, very valid argument. And yet everybody still likes it because there were African-American cowboys. There were great adventurers who were Chinese immigrants and Irish and Italian. I mean, Bank of America started in San Jose, as Bank of Italy.
Yeah.
And eventually became, Banco de Amerigo, and it became Bank of America.
Yeah.
Which is not a sponsor of ours, but B of A, if you are listening, this is not the first time. We will take
some of that sweet, sweet B of A money.
This is not the first time I have mentioned you guys on this program. We talked about him with Willis O'Brien at one point, so there you go.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Who will come into play in this story.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm so excited by this.
As everyone well knows, we do not do any episodes that do not in some way touch on either the 1964 World's Fair or King Kong.
our mutual obsessions.
Yeah.
Here. Yes.
We are going to find ourselves touching on King Kong very soon.
Very cool. So that's kind of the lineage of this romantic West, the romantic Western, and also the time it was built, the Western was like the number one genre as like superhero movies are today and the superhero genre is today. The Western was to baby boomer children of the 1950s.
It's really interesting to me looking into this stuff because so this park opens in 1960. Pretty hot on the heels of the opening of Disneyland, just a couple of years later. And in 1960, the Western was starting to transition into the revisionist Western. And so it's interesting to me to kind of track this because, Frontierland, Frontier Village, Six Flags Over Texas, which opens a little bit later, they're not doing the revisionist part.
No.
They are doing the classical, they're not doing like the stagecoach Western.
Right.
But they are doing the Calamity Jane, any
Davy Crockett, the works.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're doing that particular kind of Western, and they will not let go of it.
It's the equivalent of setting up a park that is, quote, medieval.
Yeah.
But it looks like it came out of an N.C. Wyeth, Scribner's book.
Right.
Where it's very much, knights in shining armor and damsels in long flowing pre-Raphaelite robes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's there's nothing to that in reality.
Right. It's basically a fantasy drawing come to life.
Right. And in this case, it's, Wild West.
Right.
It has its mythical origin. So it's the myth. But people are willing to run with this. And I think part of the appeal is San Jose, especially that area of San Jose, has a strong connection to the actual West. There was a quicksilver mine not too far away in the Almaden Valley.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So if you go into the Almaden Hills, you can actually still see some of the mining equipment and some of go on a trail that takes you up to the mine.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a hike, but it's worth a look. And then you had Sarah Winchester, who was the owner of the Winchester Rifle Corporation.
Yeah, exactly.
Living in San Jose and several other places because she had multiple homes. You have the Hayes family. You have a lot of connections. To the gold rush and the, quote, Wild West in San Jose itself. And when I say San Jose, a lot of people say, well, that doesn't, it's not Kansas City, it's not Tombstone, it's not Dallas.
Right.
It's San Jose. And you say, well, yes.
That's the West.
It's the West.
Yeah.
It's like, don't get any Western than this, like maybe Santa Cruz, and that's it.
Well, and the makeup of San Jose becomes very important in this story because at that point in 1960, San Jose was relatively sparse.
Yep.
And, that's why they could have the Hayes Mansion and it could have, however many 100 acres. But 2 decades later, when we reached the end of this park, San Jose was not sparse.
No.
San Jose was a residential enclave. It was urban. That ends up contributing to the downfall of this park, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, just as a quick note on that, I mean, you have to keep in mind when you think about the geography of where the park was and how close it was to the things that would eventually kill it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's only about a 10 to 15 minute drive to a much larger park called Great America, Marriott's Great America.
Yeah.
And I think it was only like a mile or two away from one of IBM's silicone chip processing plants.
Yeah.
Which I had a friend whose mom used to work there, and she was one of the bunny suit wearing silicon polishers.
Oh, yeah.
That you'd always see pictures in like Scientific American or National Geographic going, there's a Silicon Valley, and here's all these industrious people.
Right.
And not too far from Frontier Village, at one of those processing plants, that's where they filmed Tron.
Oh, no way.
When they're sneaking in to NCOM, there's that humongous door that opens up. And Flynn's like, that is a big door.
Yeah.
There's a great story where the actors are like, so not too far from that door was literally a cordoned off area where they would dump all the toxic waste in barrels and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I forget the actress's name, who plays Yuri and Lori in the...
Oh, I feel bad that I forget it.
I feel bad too, so please forgive me.
Yeah.
I love you in the movies, and you're great as Lacey Underalls in Caddyshack. But she apparently backed into a puddle of toxic waste while they were filming that. Like, that's how... Talk about Wild West of the Silicon Valley. It was like these companies just didn't seem to care.
Oh, things were getting weird.
It was very weird. And that plant was only 3 miles away from where my home was when I was growing up as a kid.
Okay.
And my grandparents were only a block away from me.
The Lowdown on the Plus Up is a Boardwalk Times podcast. At boardwalktimes.net, you'll find some of the most well-considered and insightful writing about the Walt Disney Company, Disney history, and the universe of theme parks available anywhere. Come join us at boardwalktimes.net.
It's kind of interesting because I think it's one of the reasons why people have such a connection to this park.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit of conservatism. It's like, let's preserve the park. Let's preserve. It's like, don't change this. There's enough change going on, for goodness sakes. And we'll get to what happened with this.
Yeah.
But I think that's why there's such a strong connection, is that so much change happened so rapidly around this park.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, let's go back to the, because we're all aiming for the end, because the end is pretty juicy. But
yes, yeah, it's not because we want to get to the end of this broadcast. Trust us.
No.
We want to tell you everything.
But so it's interesting. Like, you look at the origins of this park. You've got the Disneyland trip in the mid '50s. Yeah. You've got Joe Zukin deciding he's going to build this park, finding a site, losing it, finding a site, finding a designer, losing it, finding another designer. The designer that he ends up with is Lawrence Hollings, who's often called Laurie Hollings. Huh. Laurie Hollings is one of the more interesting characters I've ever run into. So this guy, he's born in South Africa.
Really?
Yeah, born in South Africa.
Okay.
His mother is from there. His father is in South Africa. I think he might be British. And he and the mother get married. They convert to Mormonism.
Okay.
And they move to Utah.
Okay.
Because they're Mormons.
That makes sense, yeah.
Something happens, it's unclear what, and the parents split up, which unusual for Mormons in Utah. But they split up. The mother and Laurie Hollings move to San Francisco.
Right.
Now, Hollings doesn't go to school.
Huh.
Hollings teaches himself to draw and draft and sculpt.
Whoa.
And just starts getting jobs.
Whoa.
So one of the earliest things he does is he's designing shop windows, big shop windows in Union Square.
Really?
Yeah, he starts designing animal displays. He studies taxidermy. Starts designing animal displays for the Academy of Sciences. Uh-huh. Eventually, he's designing sets for the San Francisco Opera. Uh-huh. I mean, he's basically a kid at this point.
Whoa.
Has never gone to school.
Wow.
It's amazing. So he, somewhere during that period, around 1933, having to do with his taxidermy and his modeling experience, he gets a job working on the stop motion animation in King Kong.
There it is.
And the weird thing is he's got all of these hits, these super bright hits of his career, and then he just moves on and he just keeps doing it. He ends up going down to LA. At one point he says I went down to Southern California to work for George Powell, but George Powell wasn't ready for me. But he does have a credit in the Puppetoon movie where they put all of the George Powell shorts together.
Yeah.
So he did eventually work for George Powell.
As did Ray Harryhausen.
Ray Harryhausen, absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm. He ends up getting a job with Disney.
Wow.
He works a little bit on the Dancing Elephants in Fantasia.
Okay. Wow.
At some point during this period, he comes back to San Francisco and ends up getting work at Playland on the beach, designing stuff.
Ah, okay.
He sculpts that giant, is it a dolphin? The one that used to be on the Cliff House?
Oh, really?
He sculpts that.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
He's going back and forth kind of from Northern and Southern California. He's working for Disney off and on, coming back up here. He goes back to Southern California. He's
like the Kane of Kung Fu of theme parks in this era.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
He works on Disneyland before it opens for a while.
Wow.
Supposedly, and this is difficult to tell because the documentation is weird on his life.
Sure.
But at some point, he supposedly did some of the design in Frontierland. He comes back to to San Francisco.
Yeah.
He designed, you may or may not remember this, but towards the end of Playland at the beach,
Yeah.
they built in a Western section,
Whoa.
like kind of a large Western section. It was called Frontier Town.
Oh, yes. Isn't that where they, I think they, tore out Topsy's dance hall and kitchen or something like that?
Yes.
Replaced it with that?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. It was kind of a last-ditch effort to save Playland.
And yes, listeners, Topsy's barnyard fried chicken funhouse dance hall was as racist as you're imagining it.
Yes.
Sorry, it was. But go ahead.
And we're perfectly happy that they tore it out.
Yeah, it's totally fine. That can be good.
But yeah, he designed a whole bunch of stuff in there. Supposedly designed the main cowboy character. There was a giant fiberglass mascot that was a mechanical moving cowboy. He designed that.
Wow.
And then somewhere along that route got the job to design Frontier Village.
Huh.
So he came into Frontier Village with an insane amount of experience, all that was relevant to this job.
Sure.
Just such an interesting guy. So when he designs Frontier Village, he's so careful about the design that, so Frontier Village is about 33 acres.
Yes.
They bought over 60 acres, but they never expanded past the 33. And the reasons for that will become clear later. But Laurie Hollings, when he designed the 33 acres of Frontier Village, designed it so carefully that they only touched 4 trees.
Wow.
Every other tree in the acreage, and it was a heavily wooded area.
Yes, it was.
Stayed.
That's so great.
And I think this is part of the magic of Frontier Village.
Mm-hmm.
It is built into a very old natural environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a sense you get. Like, you see photos, you see films of Frontier Village at this point. It seems foresty and it seems peaceful.
I distinctly remember, it was, how Disneyland has the berm.
Yes.
The infamous berm.
Yeah.
Which to me, when it comes to, and all you theme park lovers out there are going to hate me for this, but that's one of those words that sticks in my craw every time I say it. Like the word moist. I don't know why the term berm drives me nuts, but it does. Anyway, the berm that surrounds Disneyland is meant as a sight blockage, so that way you don't see the outside world.
Yeah.
What was great about Frontier Village, even as a kid, is that you were kind of transported into this park, this world.
Yeah.
And sometimes you would see patches of this kind of frontier fort style fence that surrounded it.
Yeah.
But the majority of it was these woods, and there were parts of the park that it was just woods.
Yeah.
And then you would come out. I mean, there would be things scattered throughout the woods.
Yeah.
But then you would get to the next attraction, and there it was. Here's this attraction. Here's that attraction.
It strikes me that it's not dissimilar to what Gilroy Gardens is now.
Yes, it's very, very similar. There are people who just remember the gardens alone.
Yeah.
And remember it fondly. The train, the Frontier Village train that's very much like the Disneyland train that goes all the way around the park, did the same thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of similarities where the train went around and then it interrupted the stagecoach route, that kind of stuff. Very 1950s Disneyland. There's if you look it up on Google, listeners, you can actually find a village map from 1970. Yeah. And you can see the layout of the park. And it's there are portions of it you kind of go, you can totally see, you got that from Disneyland.
Oh, yeah. There's a ton of it that's lifted straight from Disneyland.
Absolutely. But it's miniature, which is it's delightful. It's like somebody's backyard Disneyland, but it's just Frontierland.
And I want to say at this point that if anyone listening is really, really interested in seeing some images of Frontier Village, the San Jose Public Library site has, I would say, 500 to 600 pictures that you can just look at online, one right after the other. Yeah. That documents this for a lot of its history. Yeah. So it's a great resource, and I looked at a ton of them Oh, and can I, real quick, let me say
please.
one more thing about the train.
Yes.
Did you know you can still ride it?
I heard a rumor about this. Please explain.
Yes. In Cameron Park, California, which is a little bit north of here, where we are. I think it's near Sacramento?
Yep.
Okay.
Road trip.
There's a place called the Burke Junction Shopping Center. And they bought the train and they restored it. And it was running for a number of years around some track they had there at the shopping center. The shopping center got closed. It was an outdoor thing.
Right.
It got closed and bought by somebody else. And the train needed a lot of repair, but evidently it's been repaired. So you can, at this point, go and ride the original Frontier Village train.
Oh, I'm going.
Yeah.
We have to do a road trip.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
We'll do a follow-up episode and actually ride the train.
And it's interesting. I saw interviews with some of the people that worked on the train there.
Yeah.
And some of the people who were engineers driving the train. And they kept saying over and over, it is stunning how many people would come and just go, I have these memories of this train from Frontier Village in San Jose, and it just means so much to me. And this was the thing I ran into over and over looking into Frontier Village, is people have these strong emotional ties to it.
Absolutely. I mean, with the train myself, I do remember vividly sitting in one of the cars in the back. Actually, we were right behind the engine.
Yeah.
And the steam was coming over. You know, you could actually see this. You could feel the vapor of the water vapor of the steam. And being only like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I was saying something like, Daddy, it's a choo-choo or something like that. And the engineer turned around. He kind of like leaned back. He was this old guy who's obviously one of those train nuts that you have at these parks.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I better correct the kid. You know, it's a locomotive. And I felt really like shamed by that. Like, I'm a kid. What do I, like in my head, I'm like, but I'm a kid. What do I know?
Yeah.
You know, like this. No, it's the choo-choo.
Well, you got to be a jerk.
He goes, loco. And I go, choo-choo, loco. My grandpa went, yeah, you are kind of loco. He's 3. You know, like you're trying to correct a 3-year-old, dude. Let's think about this for a minute.
You know, it's funny because I was looking at, found some film of the closing day ceremony, or close to the closing day.
Yeah,
and
final roundup, as we call it.
The final roundup, and it was great because I got a better sense out of that footage than I did from any of the pictures of what it was like. Yep. But one of the things that really struck me, and it struck me while I was watching the train, was I was like, man, some of this park is dangerous.
Yes, it was.
And I saw like the train was riding around, but there was nothing to actually stop people from just walking in front of it. And I started keeping track. I was like, what else is here? And I made this list of things that was like, you would never get away with this now.
Do tell.
So it was that. There was a petting zoo.
Yes.
That was cool. But they had
live crabs.
Really?
No.
There was a fishing pond, and they let kids fish with their hands, just reaching to grab fish.
Rainbow Falls. Yes,
that's right.
I have memories of. My grandpa took me this. So let me explain the fishing pond of this. Rainbow Falls, which was like this little miniature falls setup. You, like at a lot of these Western parks, you have gold panning.
Yeah.
Where it's like this little, wooden track with sand in it, and kids look for colorful rocks and little teeny tiny little flecks of gold. Right, like Walter Knott used to do this with his gold panning, where he would actually load the gold in himself into the gold panning and have it trickle down.
Yeah.
And then you walk around with a little glass vial with some gold in it. Which would eventually develop algae because they never chlorinated the water.
Right.
And so the gold would be in there, but you have to look through all the green inside your little vial. But the Rainbow Falls was really cute because it was really tiny. I mean, I don't think it was anything taller than 20 feet.
Yeah.
And it was this, concrete and fiberglass pond.
Yeah.
And you could, when I went, they would give you a fishing pole.
Yeah, I saw kids doing both. I saw kids with fishing poles, and there was areas where they could just reach in with their hands and try and grab the fish.
Right. And the reason why it worked every single time is they never fed the fish.
Oh.
It was overflowing with, with
no.
trout or whatever it was. There's these horrible fish. And like you go to a theme park and you go fishing and then you have to take the fish home.
Yeah.
So they would wrap it up in newspaper and put it in a plastic bag and hand it. And you have to walk around the park with this dead fish for the rest of the day. So I was like dutifully carrying, and my mom carried the fish.
I assume there was a little bit of ice or something.
No. They just handed you this dead, like they were expecting, like, I think they were figuring like, well, if the parents are smart, they're going to go like, okay, kids, it's time to go. Let's go fishing really quick. And then we'll call it a day.
Yeah.
That
That'll
we
be
can
the
get
end
home
of
with
it.
our
Yeah.
fish, you know, it's not like going to like a state fair where you win a goldfish and they give it to you in a little baggie or the bowl thing, right? With the ping pong, toss. But, this is like, you've got this dead, smelly fish in your back pocket for the rest of your thing. So if you're riding, the Lost Dutchman mine ride or the Apache Whirlwind or whatever, or the war canoes, you're just like, what am I doing? What was I thinking?
Oh, I know. And you have to imagine that at some point they had to start rethinking that and going, our trash cans are kind of full with rotting fish right now.
I will note that it was probably because of Frontier Village that there was a heavy seagull population in southern San Jose.
I bet.
So I'm just saying there were always seagulls around southern San Jose for a while. And it's like, why? It's probably because of the damn fish. People go out to the park and like, I'm not taking this home. I mean, I don't know how to. Who knows what's in that water? Like.
When you used to originally the first couple of years you could fish in the rivers of America at Disneyland.
I did not know that.
You could off of Tom Sawyer's Island. They would give you a pole and you'd fish, and it was similar. You catch one, and they would wrap it and give you an ice. So that was a little smarter. But you could do that for a year or two, and then they decided it was too dangerous.
See, if they were smart, here's like a little mini plus up. If I was smart, I would actually make a connection with a frozen fish corporation.
Yeah.
And get pre-cut flanks of trout or whatever. And so the kids pull the fish out of the water, you take it up. It's like, we'll clean it for you. You just pick it up later today.
Yeah.
And then when you got it all clean, but you just hand them and you release the fish they caught back into the water. And you're giving this fake, frozen fish.
That sounds smart.
A little devious, but yes, smarter. Yeah. So, what other attractions were dangerous that you spotted in the park?
So at the petting zoo, they did this bizarre thing. I saw some film of this where they put this sort of thin plank bridge over the heads of the people in there.
Yep.
And let goats walk across it.
Yep.
And I was watching this goat like just barely making it across it, like over the head of this like 5-year-old kid. And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh yeah. And there's no guarantee that you won't get urinated or defecated upon.
Absolutely.
Yep. Oh yeah. What is this? Why is it raining marbles?
Yeah.
Oh, there's the goat overhead.
Yeah.
Unlike Big Thunder, it's like, don't watch the goat.
Yeah. Don't look up.
Don't look up.
They had a stagecoach ride. It was interesting to me that a lot of these things, stagecoach, canoes, there was a burro ride, much like at Disneyland. But they just kind of went around the scenery. There wasn't a ton to see.
It was the experience of riding on these older contraptions. Yeah.
But look, the stagecoach ride, I saw pictures of that thing, and it was like packed. I mean, just so many people hanging off of this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, that's not great.
I rode on top of that thing.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly when it was done, I think I passed my first kidney stone because it was so violently shaking. It's like my mom had to hang on to me because I think I almost fell off of it. So, because we were on top.
Did I tell you, by the way, and this is just a brief aside, that I actually found a legitimate medical study about people passing kidney stones on Big Thunder Mountain?
No.
Yeah. It had been this kind of rumor for a while that if you had a kidney stone, you could ride Big Thunder Mountain Railroad and you would pass the kidney stone. It turns out that rumor is true. And not the California one, though, particularly the Florida one. And people heard it enough that doctors did a study, and it turns out that yes, if you have a kidney stone and you ride Big Thunder Mountain Railroad in Florida, you are very likely to pass it.
Wow.
Who knows why?
Dang. That's almost worth the price of admission.
Right.
Like, I'm in real pain. Let's go ride Big Thunder.
I would, yeah.
Let's go to Tomorrowland. I feel great.
I'm feeling good.
Woohoo. Howdy, folks. Do you have a kidney stone? Well, come on down to Big Thunder Mountain. You'll be peeing gravel. Flush them nuggets, little partners.
And then we'll pan for gold.
This is the wildest urinary tract in the wilderness. This went downhill really fast. I'm so sorry.
All right, it was my fault. I will reel it back in. So I want to ask you about your experience with something that I saw a film of.
Yes.
Because it looked terrifying to me. I was looking, so I look at that Ferris wheel they had, and I'm like, this looks old, but it's small. How bad is it? And then I saw film of it moving, and it was like going at lightning fast speed. Is that really what it was like?
That is really what it was like. I think it's because it's based off of the older state fair style of Ferris wheels.
Yeah.
And those were not meant as a passive ride initially.
Yeah.
When Mr. Ferris first did his wheel, it was meant to be an observatory.
Yeah.
Hey, get up in the wheel, get a good view, come back down. But over time, because of scenic railways and roller coasters and hurdy-gurdies, it became fierce competition, so they made the Ferris wheels smaller, faster, so you get the impression of going up and backwards and up and backwards.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't meant to like, oh, wow, this is really nice. It was like, whoa, gosh, we're going backwards and up and backwards and up. So it really was kind of terrifying.
That was what it looked like. And I was watching this film. I was like, I've never seen a Ferris wheel go that fast.
Yeah.
And it looks like an erector set. So it really
the old rickety, There's an interesting thing about that Ferris wheel.
Oh, yeah?
Apparently, there was a guy, he was a freshman at San Jose City College.
Okay.
Named Jim Bakich.
Okay, not Jim Backus, not the voice of Mr. Magoo.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna ride the Ferris wheel. Oh. No, it's not Jim Backus. Jim Bakich attempted to set a world's record for the longest continuous Ferris wheel ride. In 1964. I'm sorry, no, 1965, and he vowed to spend 2 full weeks aboard the park's wheel nonstop.
Ooh. We all have the same question.
Why?
Well, no, the question is, where did he go to the bathroom?
Maybe he Howard Hughes'd it, just give me a bottle of milk, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where they got the idea for the goat bridge in the peninsula. I don't know. So that, and I don't know if he actually succeeded in it, but he did make an attempt.
Yeah.
So there was other people who tried to set world records at Frontier Village. There was somebody who tried to finish the longest foot-propelled scooter journey.
Yeah.
Of a 114 miles from Big Sur all the way down to Frontier Village.
Frontier Village.
That was the final stop.
Did he make it?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
And also the world's largest pizza. Which at the time was 4.5 feet in diameter. Why you would eat that, I don't know, but awesome. I'm in.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of these kind of like, hey, it's a theme park. I'm going to set a world record here and do something silly, Really strange, some of the things. But that Ferris wheel, I can't imagine being like, I'm going to go on that thing backwards and go around and around and around and nonstop. It's like, okay, you go right ahead. You just go right ahead. But when it opened in the mid-'60s, it was praised as being cleanly, friendly, not jam-packed with people all the time, because there was enough space put into it to let people spread out and not be clustered together.
Well, and some of this is Lori Holling's design, because It's not a big park.
No.
And, if you consider that Disneyland, the park Disneyland is, something like 150 acres, 200 acres, something like that. Frontier Village was 30.
Yeah.
I mean, it was small, but the design was so smart that people didn't seem to notice.
Yeah.
And, I read very similar things about like it was just so clean. And one of the things, if you go to the San Jose Public Library site, there's a bunch of pictures of just employee manuals.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of stuff that I love.
Oh, yeah.
I obsess over that stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, because it's a great little window into like, here's how we're gonna operate this.
But one of the things you really see and you heard about Frontier Village is that the employees were treated really well.
Yep.
And everybody felt involved and invested in the thing. And this is similar to Disneyland in the early years, and it, less and less so as it kind of went on. But everyone's memory of working, everyone that I read about, everyone's memory was we were all doing this together. Whatever role you had to do, you did. If you were one of the stuntmen and the marshal was sick that day, you're the marshal. And, they used to have, as we talked about, gunfights on the street. And they used, this was another thing on my dangerous list. They actually used real Colt single action army revolvers, like your pappy used in the big war.
Oh, yeah.
And they're just filled with black powder blanks and double barrel shotguns filled with black powder blanks.
They were terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, real honest to God guns. If someone put a bullet in there, you'd die. But they did these shootouts and nobody died. Everyone enjoyed it.
I almost did.
Did you?
I ran out because when you're a 4-year-old kid, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
I was running. I saw grandma, because this would happen right in the middle on Main Street. So they had different streets. You had California Street, Front Street, Nevada Street, and Main Street.
Yeah.
And I was in the Penny Arcade. Which is right opposite the marshal's office, which is usually where the shootout would take place.
Yeah.
Was in this little Main Street square. And it's opposite of where people could put their lockers,
Yeah.
But they had a Nickelodeon, so they had a Penny Arcade, they had the like little claw machines and all the kind of stuff that would be available at the time, and mutoscopes and stuff.
Yeah.
And fortune telling machines. And I saw my grandma, and I ran across the street right as the guys are starting to going bam, bam to each other.
Oh, man.
So I was like, oh, my God. And my grandma grabbed me and yanked me off the street.
Wow.
Because I was right in the line of fire of these things.
Oh, geez.
And I remember just being, like a lot of little kids just holding
they're
my
so
hands.
loud.
Yeah, it's very, very loud. I remember that.
Yeah.
But my favorite memory of that, though, was like being fascinated by this and watching it. And then they arrested Black Bart, the bad guy.
They did every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
And they take him over to the marshal's office and put him into jail.
Yeah.
And then Grandma and I go over, and we went over to the Last Chance Casino, which was it was pretty much, they had some games in there, but it was mostly like, let's go get a hot dog.
Yeah.
And as we're walking out, I see Black Bart casually walking out of the marshal's office. And my little 4-year-old righteous indignation kicked in, and I rushed right in going, guys, you let the bad guy go. He's getting away. Like, I'm yelling, like, go get him. And it's like, no, he's fine. He's, like one of the guys, like, they kind of went, uh-oh. Well, you can totally see him trying to save face. Like, he's totally reformed now. We reformed him. And I go, in 10 minutes? Like, I'm 4 years old going, in 10 minutes? Go get him. Like, come on, Sheriff, go get the bad guy.
Recidivism.
Right. Repeat offender. That's one bonehead name, and that ain't me no more. Okay, then.
Yeah, and I saw some stuff where occasionally they would engage kids to both catch Black Bart and imprison him.
Yep.
Or sometimes kids would free him, like they'd hold a jailbreak and let him out.
That's cool.
Which is just, I think, part of the charm of this. But one of the things I was getting at with the gunfights and how the staff of that park worked was they would have a gunfight. Someone would get shot and die.
Yeah.
And undertakers would come with a big wheelbarrow put the guy in the wheelbarrow and cart him off.
Yeah.
So that was what they did. The people who did the undertakers were often just the custodial crew. And so they would be sweeping and I was reading about this. They would be sweeping. The gunfight would start. They would walk into an area, drape an undertaker's outfit on, walk out, pick up the body, take it away, go back and put their custodial uniform back on. And
you fill in a part. You just go do it.
This was how that park seemed to work. And I think this is part of people's affection for it, there was just a real sense of we're all doing this together to make this experience magical.
Mm-hmm. It was a collective playtime.
I saw a few great pieces where they were talking about building, there was an area, the Schoolhouse Museum.
Yes.
Which was a big schoolhouse kind of up on a hill. Mm-hmm. There was a bell you could ring. And originally the idea was that they were going to basically build it as like a wax museum. So you would go in and there'd be wax kids, which is pretty creepy when you think about it.
I'm creeped out now.
And so there was a guy working on it, and he talks about like he's there doing some stuff, and Lori Hollings is there, and they're putting planks up together, and they're putting the rope in, and he's like, "Hey, Lori, I've got an idea. Why don't we do this not with kids, but we do it as kind of like just as if the kids are all outside, and you can just tour what a schoolhouse was like." And Hollings is like, "Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that." And that's just how this place was built.
Yeah.
Like the designer, the guy who worked on King Kong and helped build parts of Disneyland and worked on Playland at the beach, is just standing there going, "Sure, construction guy, I like your idea. Let's go with it.
Grab a hammer, start banging away.
Yeah.
Let's do it."
Yeah.
I want to bring up some of the rides.
Yes.
There's a couple that are pretty standards. They had the merry-go-round.
That are pretty standard.
A lot of very standard. You had the ridiculously fast Ferris wheel.
Yep.
You had the merry-go-round.
Uh-huh.
You had Stampede, which is a classic, whirly-girly kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you're zipping around backwards.
Yeah, sort of a mixer twister kind of.
It's a mixer twister.
Yeah.
But the actual, what I love to call a swirl and hurl, was called the Sidewinder.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that has the big half dome that's built over, and you're spinning around backwards. I can't remember the actual name of what that type of ride is called.
Like a tilt-a-whirl.
Tilt-a-whirl, that's it. It's a tilt-a-whirl. But obviously, one of my favorites was the Lost Dutchman mine ride.
Yeah, I wish I could find better pictures of this because it looked really cool, and it seemed to have this interesting mixture of sort of just a haunted dark ride, but also kind of the Rainbow Caverns mine train feel from Disneyland.
Yep. That's exactly it.
You got to ride it?
I got to ride it. I still have distinct memories of it, and it actually led to my career as a haunted house designer.
Whoa.
So this was my first experience on any sort of haunted dark ride, was the Lost Dutchman ride, not the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
I got to ride the Haunted Mansion when I was 5. When I was 3 and 4, because we went to Frontier Village so much.
Right, because it was close.
Yeah, it was
cheap.
it was cheap. It was down the street from Grandma and Grandpa's house, so I could, and Grandma and Grandpa would take me all the time. Grandpa Jim, and who plays a little minor part during the demise of this park, by the way.
Interesting. Okay,
but the Frontier Mine, Lost Dutchman Mine, is a blending of Rainbow Caverns, a little bit of Haunted Mansion, and just a little bit of Nature's Wonderland, all kind of mixed together. And when I was done writing this thing, I was so inspired that I tell this infamous story about my origin stories as a haunt designer, where I took 2 card tables and stretched a piece of cloth over it and charged money, where I had, a haunted tunnel, a cardboard sign. But I made it look, it was very much inspired by the Lost Dutchman ride. I had those memories.
Okay.
But the interior of it was all black light.
Yeah.
Not very elaborate sets, except for the equivalent of the Rainbow Caverns,
right?
Because they have a lot of concrete stalagmites and stalactites and some pools filled with UV reactive water, which we talked about the origins of UV paint previously.
Yep.
But they had a skeleton with a TNT box, and he would, that was your escape. Was the plunger would come down, and you would blow up, and you get out with red flashing lights.
Yeah,
that was the end of that. But it was very, very short, and the Dutchman Miner was creepy as hell because it did not look realistic at all. I'm showing Kelly a picture of it.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah, it's if you have any familiarity with Kilroy was here as an emblem.
Yeah,
just put a giant Gabby Hayes beard on him and a Wild West hat, and that's the Lost Dutchman. He was hideous. But there were a lot of skeletons. Mm-hmm. There was this drowning guy that was made out of concrete.
Oh, I saw a picture of that. Yeah,
it was
actually an interesting effect.
It kind of is.
I don't know how it looks under the black lights, but
even as a kid, some of the stuff you're just like, meh. Ooh, skeleton, that's cool. Yeah. Ooh, that's cool. But you wrote in mine cards.
Yeah, and I saw because they had some film of them outside, and they were pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, they were kind of not quite mine cars. They were just like mine boxes.
Yeah, they were like little boxes, but the track they were on was super thin. It was using some sort of bumper detection thing. I don't really understand.
It is the same ride conveyance design as the Alice in Wonderland ride.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
In which it follows a narrow track. And the inner parts bump and go, okay, we're going to go over here, over here. So you're kind of doing this back and forth wobbling thing as you're rounding corners.
Right.
So again, it's another kidney stone clearer. It's delightful. It was just a very simple, delightful ride. And then, of course, the one that I loved as a kid were the old-time cars.
Yeah, the antique autos.
Yep, antique autos. They were really cool because you really got the feeling. When you were steering, you really were steering. It was on a track.
Right.
So you couldn't veer too far off, but you could bump and zip back and forth. So it was like Autopia.
Yeah.
But with, great race style cars that made the and you had the old squeeze bulb horns on as you're going around this, and it would intersect with the burro track. So the burros are looking at you like, ay vey, and then, it was crazy. And it was a very small track, and you run alongside the train. And then you had a couple of other rides, like the Roundup, which is one of those spinning tilt-a-whirl things. And
right.
But then you have Indian Jim's War Canoes.
Yeah. and real quick, I wanted to say the guy that did the recreation of Frontier Village in his backyard actually bought two of those antique autos. He owns them.
Oh, that's so cool. That is cool.
But yeah, there was the Indian War Canoes, and there was Indian Island, which I didn't exactly understand what that was.
It literally was an island, where they kept Indians. And I'm not making a joke. Like you would not see any sort of reference to Native Americans or Injuns, as they were referred to back then,
right,
until you got to Indian
Island at the time.
Yeah.
One thing I could not figure out from pictures, and maybe you can tell me this.
Yes.
So I saw people dressed as Native Americans on the island.
Yep.
I don't know what they were doing, but I could not figure out if these were white people dressing as Native Americans or if they had hired people with actual Native heritage. Do you remember?
The memories I have are embarrassing.
Okay. For you or for them?
Yes. Because you have to keep in mind when the park closed, I was 6 years old.
Yeah, so
I have to go off of my memory. But I do remember one person of color. In Indian Village.
Okay.
In the Indian Island. They had these giant concrete teepees, and they were canvas, but they had soaked them with fiberglass so they would last the weather and so forth.
Yeah.
And I always remember Indian Island being very hot.
Yeah.
I have distinct memories of going, I don't want to be here. because they had the trading post and they had the archery thing, and I like, get me out of here. I don't want to be here.
Yeah, and I wonder if, I mean, there's probably a lot of reasons that Indian Island is not particularly represented in photos and stuff that I saw. One is probably it's just uncomfortable. But the other one, I have to wonder, like, I heard over and over people talking about how cool, like temperature-wise, Frontier Village was.
Yes.
And a lot of that had to do with you had 100-year-old trees.
Yep.
Because thanks to Laurie Hollings, who did not cut very many of them down.
Yeah.
But I have to wonder if maybe that's another reason that the Indian Island wasn't represented, was people didn't like to go there because it was hot. This month at Boardwalk Times is all about succession. Editor-in-Chief Zach Perlstein presents a 4-part series about who might take over the CEO slot after the once-and-future Bob steps down. Hey, here at the Lowdown on the Plus Up, we really appreciate you listening to our show. It really means a lot to us. We also want to remind you that Election Day is coming up on November 5th. Get out there and exercise your right to vote. It's really important. And hey, if you happen to be at Disneyland over the next few weeks, ask them about the Halloween tree in Frontierland. It's a pretty good story.
And I think that's why in the 70s, that's when another park would rear its head in San Jose. Marriott's Great America.
Right.
And part of the appeal of Marriott's Great America was its proximity to 1976, because the whole premise was America's great. You know, we got this. Frontier Village has one merry-go-round. We got a 2-story one.
Yeah,
we've got this. We got Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, which is interesting because Frontier Village had original characters.
Yes, it did.
For a while. And they were cool, I thought. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I am the kind of guy that is fascinated by this sort of thing. I love rides like the Lost Dutchman Mine Train or the Cave at Six Flags Over Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Or the Cave Train at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. I love those kind of things.
Yeah.
I love, like, weird, dark rides with original properties.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neat stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had Theodore Bear. Which was just a kind of cute bear character. They had, I really love this one, Tumbleweed the Gold Digger.
Yep.
Who was sort of a Yosemite Sam kind of looking thing, but really pretty adorable when you look at him. And they had Cactus Kong.
Cactus Kong.
Which, what were they thinking? Yes.
Cactus Kong.
He's showing me a picture, and it's in black and white, which doesn't do it justice because...
Neon green gorilla.
Yes. Like, super bright.
Yeah, a dark green hands, dark green face, with a big 10-gallon hat that was white.
Yep.
And bright green fur. And if you were Cactus Kong, you were a troublemaker.
Yeah.
To the point where, not too far away from... the park, there was a shopping mall called Oak Ridge Mall.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a J.C. Penney there that used to have, there was one of those weird places where the shopping mall would have like a little cafe with a long diner counter. And my mom and I were there, again, I must have been 4 or 5.
Yeah.
We're going to go shopping at Monkey Ward's or something like that.
Yeah.
So we went to J.C. Penney to go get something to eat. And all of a sudden there's this banging on the window behind me.
Yeah.
And there's Cactus Kong. Trying to get my attention. Go, hey, kid, you know. And he's like, you know, waving at me. And I'm like, oh, freaking out.
Yeah.
And then I was like, hey, it's Cactus Kong. And like, you know, he came into the diner and was like trying to interact with kids. And he had a minder who was like passing out Frontier Village flyers. They were trying to drum up business. Right. Because they were trying to do more public appearances. Because this is the same era in which McDonald's would have the Hamburglar show up and start stealing cheeseburgers in a restaurant with an audience. And when Toys R Us would have you line up to meet Skeletor and Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes. You know? So Cactus Kong, wow. That's all I got to say. It was like, I don't know why, but it worked. People have distinct memories of the green gorilla.
Oh, it's shocking to look at.
Oh, yeah.
Like, whoa.
It's terrifying, but at the same time, it's like, this is kind of cool. Like, in retrospect, it's like, I kind of want to make a replica of a Cactus Kong outfit so I could wear that.
Well, and I love
out to dinner.
I love that by the time they hit the 70s, they had started building this mythology.
Yeah.
The park had its own mythology. And so it had these characters that sort of fit into it. It had the gunfighter Western characters. And there was kind of loosely an ongoing story with them.
Oh, yeah.
Much like you see in like Ghost Town Alive at Knott's still these days. Where like if you went enough, you could kind of see a progression with what these characters did, who they were, and like the marshal gets replaced at one point, and there's a backstory as to why. And it's super interesting.
Yeah.
And then a lot of this gets kind of tossed out the door in the late 70s.
Yes.
And the reason, it's very interesting, the reason that it gets tossed out the door is that the owner, Zukin, so he's got this extra land. He could pretty much double the size of his park.
Sure.
And so he goes to his investors and says, I want to double the size of the park. We've got this competitor down the road. It's becoming a problem. And the investors won't do it. So what Zukin does... And it actually is a really smart move. He sells the park to this other company. He sells it to a bunch of developers called Rio Grande Industries.
Oh, yes.
And this sounds bad, but it's actually not bad. It's actually a pretty smart move. Rio Grande keeps him on to run the park. And Rio Grande owns a company called Aero Development. And so what Rio Grande wants to do is they want to keep Frontier Village as a theme park, expand it. They're willing to put the money in, and they want to use it as a kind of proving ground for Aero Development's new theme park attractions. Like, this is a huge win-win.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like, you've got the original management, the one that's built this like family-friendly, self-sustaining infrastructure. You've got this company that is like the number one maker of theme park vehicles in the world.
Right.
And they want to come in and take this park and really, flex its muscle a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's a great idea. One of the things that comes to this, and this is why I started this story, one of the things that comes with this is Rio Grande brings in new characters. And so for the last couple of years of Frontier Village's life, the old ones, they're replaced by Hanna-Barbera characters.
Yep. Jabberjaw, Fred Flintstone.
Weekstraw.
Yeah. And
Scooby-Doo,
Huckleberry Hound.
Yep.
You bet. All of it.
And so that's okay, but it is a little bit sad because you lose a lot of the original property that the park itself had developed. But maybe it's going to be worth it. So they go in and they start pushing for this development, but San Jose has changed a lot.
Yes, it has, especially in that particular region.
Yeah, and they are surrounded on all sides by residential areas.
Yep.
And the residents in the area, they don't want the park to expand, and they fight it, and they fight it, and they fight it. I actually saw a short documentary online where a guy went through some of the documents that were being presented. And Frontier Village, and Rio Grande Industries, they did all of these studies. And it just showed over and over again that expanding the park was going to be pretty good for the area. But the residents just fought and fought and fought, and they eventually just gave up.
Yep. And one of the people that was interviewed for those studies about how it would affect the real estate prices were a pair of owners of a little fledgling real estate company called New Almaden Development Corporation, run by Robert and Jim Overstreet. It was like a quick little, like, what do you think? What would it do? And they knew that their son and grandson loved the place.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, it would actually improve some of the value here and so forth. Oddly enough, it was because of what was happening in that area that my father would eventually say, it's time to move someplace.
Okay.
And he would buy land down in Gilroy.
Yeah.
And that's where we would move. Not too long after Frontier Village shut down.
Oh, wow.
The same year, within roughly about 10 to 15 days, Frontier Village closes and we move out.
So 1980. Like
1980.
Yeah, it would be late 1980.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved how they promoted the end of this park.
Yes.
The final roundup. And they did something extraordinary. They still had that kind of local quality to it. They made this great commercial.
Oh, did you see the one where the guy's like locked into prison?
Yes.
Yes, that's so great.
And I remember that commercial distinctly because I would watch that on Captain Cosmic on Channel 2, KTVU 2.
Yeah.
And Captain Cosmic was still on the air, played by Bob Wilkins, who was also the host of Creature Features, their late-night monster movie show. And there's this guy in pretty much like an Escape from Alcatraz prison uniform, dungarees, and he's like, Frontier Village is about to close forever.
Yeah.
Better get your tickets now. I won't be able to. And all of a sudden, like this jail cell closes around him. I get out in October. You're like, and he looks all sad, like, you better. It's like, we better get tickets, otherwise we're going to go to jail. Like, that was my impression. It's like, we better get him out of jail and get tickets,
I just saw that commercial just the other day, and I was like, that is the weirdest ad campaign I've ever seen.
It's like one step short of, like, the owner of the park looking in the camera and giving boo-boo lip.
Yeah.
Please come and buy tickets for our park. We're about to close. Boo, boo, boo.
Well, and people did.
Yes, they did.
So many people came.
It looked like Miller's Outpost threw up in the park.
Yes.
There were so many puff jackets and Western shirts and tight jeans.
Yeah.
I mean, so 1980. It was like a Marlboro ad had come to life.
Yeah, it was astonishing.
It was crazy. Yeah.
They were saying at one point like 30,000 people a day were coming. And, for perspective, so Disneyland, 4 or 5 times bigger than that park. Mm-hmm. If Disneyland hit 80,000 people, they would shut the park. Yep. They would stop taking admission. So you've got nearing half of that. Yeah. For a park that is like
a fraction of the size.
Yeah,
a fraction of that size.
But people, again, they're so emotionally connected to Frontier Village.
We went. I mean, I remember my parents taking me. It's like, we got it one last time. Let's go do it. And it was the first time that I, as a kid, got to dictate when we left.
Yeah.
My parents are like, did you ride everything? Did you ride everything you wanted to ride? Yeah. I want to do the Dutchman one more time.
Yeah.
And I felt so sad because it was like I knew the Dutchman was not going to be there ever again. So yeah, it was heartbreaking because Great America was fun, but it was so big, and there was something strangely impersonal about it. Yeah. That they've never been able to shake. And I worked at that park. Yeah. I worked when it became Paramount's Great America. Yeah. I played a Klingon. Very short summer job. It was not easy when you're boiling your buns off on in a neoprene and pleather outfit going kapla for 6 hours a day. You're like, I'm done. So I did not last long. But that park is really, really huge and it's very impersonal, and they just didn't know how to keep it family friendly because it became the teenagers park. And with the teenagers and the demographics of that area that surrounded Great America, it started to get kind of a seedy attitude that we never could shake. Whereas Frontier Village was always family friendly and safe.
Frontier Village never tried to be anything other than what it was. Yeah. All the way to the end. Like you saw, if you were there, I saw footage of it. Like they were still going full bore, being exactly who they were up until the last day.
Yep. And then not long after, they started tearing it apart. Yeah. When they shut it down, they tore it apart. They auctioned off the rides. All of the antique automobiles got sold off. Yeah. The train got sold off. Everything, bits and pieces, just kind of scattered to the wind. Right. And I think that's another tragedy of it all. It was just so there was kind of a scattering of all that was kind of very, very sad.
The merry-go-round I saw went to Santa's Village.
Yep.
Until Santa's Village closed down.
Yep.
Though I understand that's reopened.
Yep. It's coming back, which is pretty great.
Yeah. It's interesting, and you even see it in that ad for the final days with the jail ad, which is so funny. And it's just like they never lost their sense of humor. Mm-hmm. They never lost the almost kind of dark sense of humor that comes with doing Western shows.
Yep.
They just stayed kind of true to their mission all the way through.
And I think that's it. And like, it never wavered. And I think that was that constancy of this local park that people could locally believe in, locally go to and say, this is a piece of us.
Yeah.
This is our thing.
And I think what seems to me to be true is that if the Rio Grande Aero Development Plan had worked, if the neighborhoods and I'm not casting judgment on what the residents there did.
No.
Like, I don't know the situation. I don't know what it would have been like. I don't know what they were worried about. But if that plan had gone through, I think Frontier Village would have become kind of a powerhouse.
It could have been.
They were also, as part of that, they were not only going to expand into like the rest of the 60 acres that they had, but they were also going to, there was a drive-in theater attached to the back of it.
Yep.
And they were going to knock that out and turn that into Theme Park 2. And I think Frontier Village would have been a force to be reckoned with.
I think so too.
But it didn't work. They had to close it down.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you wonder. So
wait, before we do this, I want to throw one more thing.
Oh, please,
very quickly.
Yeah.
About Lori Hollings, because I made.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I made a note about this. One of the things that they found after Lori and his wife passed away, they lived up until the 1990s.
Wow.
They moved to Mesa, Arizona, and lived there. One of the things that they found was that Lori Hollings had books after books after books of pictures of Playland at the beach from like the 1930s. And no one's exactly sure why Lori Hollings. I mean, he did work there, but it is clear that a lot of these pictures were taken by someone else at times when he wasn't there. And there's some belief that the owner, who seemed to really have an affection towards Hollings, just gave them to him.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But if you see pictures of Playland at the beach now, and especially from that earlier period, because you still see some 50s and 60s stuff, but especially that earlier period, almost inevitably they came out of Lori Hollings' collection. So our idea of what that was, of what Playland at the beach in the 30s and 40s was, we have that because of Lori Hollings.
That's so cool.
Otherwise, there's barely any documentation at all.
Wow. Well, we're going to have to reach out to his estate and do a little research so we can do another show just on Playland at the beach.
A lot of it is kept in a couple of different libraries. The San Jose Library has a lot of Lori Hollings.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, I just wanted to get that in because that was really significant.
That's great. That's a fantastic thing. And it's a nice little teaser for a future show.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've had a chance to think about this, but what would your plus up be regarding Frontier Village?
Yeah. So, the easy choice here, I have had a little time to think about it. The easy choice here is obviously to say my plus up would be that the Aero Development deal went through and they carried through with those plans and continued to be the wonderful park that they were, throughout the years.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. And what I would like to say is I would like to use them as an object lesson to give a plus up to Disneyland.
Ooh.
And my plus up is that the people at Disneyland and the people at Universal and the people at Cedar Fair and Six Flags, go take a look at what worked there. Go take a look at how people were treated and how invested the staff was and how people, the staff felt like they were family, and then they made the guests feel like they were family. And that's how people grew so attached to Frontier Village. Go look at what worked there and do that in your park.
I feel like you're about to plug Abigail's Army. With this statement.
We don't know anything about Abigail's Army.
We don't talk about Abigail.
we have never met anyone that knows anything about Abigail's Army.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great plus up, and it's a great suggestion because I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It's something that an object lesson that I think Disney really does need to learn now more than ever.
And you still see it at the parks, but it is now an individual's volition to push outside of their role to bring that magic to the role.
And sometimes they get squashed down.
They do. And so, but that should be part of the culture.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. So my plus up is along those lines a little bit where the Rio Grande development would have happened also in my scenario. But how would you expand a park of Frontier Village when the Western was already starting? Like we're approaching the 80s.
Yeah.
The Western is not as popular.
Right.
There was a nightclub called the Saddle Rack, not too far from Frontier Village.
Is this going to get dirty, Pete?
No.
Okay.
But but it was a total urban cowboy, mechanical bull style.
Yeah.
Joint. Yeah. We got both types of music here, country and Western.
Yeah.
But it's so there was definitely a target audience in San Jose that could sustain the Western part.
Sure.
But not the burgeoning Silicon Valley spread that was rapidly happening in that area.
Yeah.
And southern San Jose throughout the 80s and 90s rapidly became the suburbs where the service workers lived. Very much like lower working middle class families were living in that area. And then all of the wealthier people were moving closer and closer to Mountain View, Palo Alto, and some parts of Santa Clara, or moving into suburbs like Morgan Hill and Gilroy.
Yeah.
But I think if I was part of that expansion, which I was way too young to be a part of, but let's ignore that for a minute. I would say, like, let's continue with the notion of frontier.
Yeah.
What other frontiers are there?
Yeah.
How about the frontier of space?
Yeah.
How about the frontier of science? How about the frontier of exploration? There are many different frontiers that you could run into and still maintain a delightful theme with it.
Yeah.
With that same kind of family atmosphere kind of approach.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been my suggestion in the alternate reality where this park still existed.
Yeah.
Is like, well, yeah, you get to still have the Wild West, and that's the opening, but have other frontiers.
Yeah.
The jungle frontier in an area. Have a jungle area, have a space area. Yes, I know we're starting to tread into the Disney area.
Yeah, I was like, we're starting to build Disneyland.
But you know what? That's kind of appropriate because that's kind of how this whole park started.
That's right.
So, like...
Yeah. Well, and I still love Disneyland, and I think Disneyland did a lot of these things for a long time.
Yep.
But when you're talking about frontiers, it's very interesting because I think of frontiers as an optimistic idea.
Yes.
And it doesn't quite fit the mold all the time, but I think of it as possibility.
It's a human experience.
Right.
The frontier is actually a human notion.
Right.
Of the possibility of what is this really about? It's the road less traveled. And that's kind of how that whole park always felt. Well, I think this is a marvelous place for us to stop.
Yeah. To
all of our friends out there from the San Jose area who remember this episode's for you.
Yep.
All of my fellow San Joseans.
Yep.
Or San Jose Gelinos. I don't know. Or San Joseans.
I don't know.
It's San Joseans. I should be ashamed of myself for saying that because I'm from there. But anyhow.
Yeah, no, thank you, Danica, for suggesting this.
Thank you, Danica.
And everyone listening, please refer us to other people.
And to other parks.
Yeah, and let us know what you're interested in. Let us know if you've got some plus-ups that you think are better than ours, because maybe they are.
Maybe they are.
Let us
Absolutely.
know.
And if you worked at the park, let us know if you like this broadcast. If you worked there at one time and
heck yeah,
one of those people, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm Peter Overstreet.
And I'm Kelly McCubbin.
And you've been listening to
The Lowdown
on the Plus Up.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Lowdown on the Plus Up. If you have, please tell your friends where you found us. And if you haven't, we can pretend this never happened and need not speak of it again. For a lot more thoughts on theme parks and related stuff, check out my writing for Boardwalk Times at boardwalktimes.net. Feel free to reach out to Pete and I on our Lowdown on the Plus Up Facebook group, or send us a message directly at comments@lowdown-plus-up.com. We really want to hear about how you'd plus these attractions up and read some of your ideas on the show. Our theme music is Goblin, Tinker, Soldier, Spy by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. We'll have a new episode out real soon. Why? Because we like you.
Village Amusement Park is closing forever this September. Don't you miss it. I will. I won't get out until October.